I've been involved in computer graphics, I think well, gosh, I don't know, early 80s really is kind of, I think, when I discovered SIGGRAPH. And but one thing I will say though is I've never been a coder my whole life. So early SIGGRAPH kind of intimidated me, like, oh, I guess you have to be a computer scientist to really practice this. But as the tools became accessible and ubiquitous to designers, which I primarily consider myself one as, I readily embraced it. My education, my background was in architecture at the University of Texas, and I think, can lay claim to be the first one to use computing in my final years of work there, which was a novelty at the time. And this is like 1986, I think. And but since that time, I've spent really my entire career trying to adopt and utilize and in essence kind of pioneer some early adaptation of these graphic technologies towards creative ends. So that's kind of the thread of what I'll show you here. This is entitled Environments, Innovation, and VR because this is kind of currently, I've always been an environments artist, and that's and my practice for the last 7 or 8 years has been in the VR spectrum. But in any case, let me go through this. So my background, much like I just kind of described, is kind of in this domain. So this is a slide from one of my classes, just to kind of give a nickel background. Consider myself a visual effects designer because I worked in visual effects here in LA for a few decades in feature film and at all the major studios and production houses. But I've always taught, and I taught always at night when I was working on films. And my involvement with USC began, I guess, about 20 years ago. And then I was invited to come in full time about 15 years ago. And at that time, I wanted to start my own company, and which is Extra Studio listed here. And I took advantage of that and split my time between teaching full time and doing my work at X-Res with a partner. And so we were kind of a specialty boutique house, we call them, and working in VR and visual effects for different projects. I'll show you a few of those in this prezzo. But again, my concentration is environments, lighting and rendering, compositing. I've done a lot of work in full dome, planetarium domes, currently do a tremendous amount of work in photogrammetry and just kind of generalized landscape work. These classes that I've taught don't mean much to you. I'll show you that in a second, and so forth. So this is, so anyway, I'm resident in the School of Cinematic Arts at USC, which is one of the leading film programs in the country and here in LA. And we have different divisions. So I'm in the division of digital arts, or actually, I'm sorry, animation and digital arts. That was a little slip. I put digital arts in front of animation. But nonetheless, we support all media approaches to animation, of which there's a vast array. So all the way from stop motion to hand drawn to polished CGI to stop motion, et cetera. So this is just an example of kind of the range of work that is done there. These are the classes that I have tooled up over the years there. And again, these are the more of the technical kind of CG side of things. I'm a Maya kind of guru and an instructor. I do a lot with Nuke as well, compositing. These days I work with VR with Unity. I'm shifting over to UE right now, and so forth, and then work with a variety of different renderers in the past as well. But in any case, let's move on to some imagery. So these are some images that are from my classes. Again, this presentation was kind of geared towards students. And these are called latitude longitude images, or spherical maps. I'm sure you know that. And these is basically a sphere that's unwrapped, and just examples of working with existing assets or creating different assets. But you can see they have kind of an aesthetic quality to them. So the work that I do in the class is technical, but it's technique in service of art. And these are different, from different narrative-based experiences, if you will. And again, similar things. These are probably more from animation students that are creating modeling, from scratch. And this is some work. I love to take my students into the outdoors. This is a location in the Mojave Desert, about an hour-and-a-half drive from LA. And it's a terrific place to capture landscape and then modify it, use it as the basis for creative work. So here you can see kind of treatments and modifications of the landscape and manipulations. And I've been doing this now. I've been leading field trips both in the spring and the fall. Oh my gosh, probably for at least 18, maybe 20 years time now. And we just have a terrific time at it. And so these days we cover spherical panoramas, photogrammetry, HDR acquisition, maybe gigapixel if they're interested, and just a variety of acquisition techniques. But the idea is to kind of capture spatial parameters and spatial experiences from this location, which has a lot of very interesting erosion and so forth. This is called Red Rock State Park. Of course, there's 1,000 red rocks across the US, but this is one in California. So anyway, let's move past. So then these are some of the features that I worked on. I'm known for this fairly antiquated film now, The Fifth Element, but an old kind of cult favorite at this point. But this was a formative film for CG, where it was really that turning point of moving away from practical, physical-based models and effects towards digital. So it was an interesting hybrid. So in other words, these were built on stage as miniatures. This was a full-size set on a pneumatic gimbal. This is a CG engine that was appended to it, and the background is half 3D, half matte painting. So it's really just a hybrid. And this was a real formative experience for me as well, to kind of glean a little bit off the prior masters of physical effects and apply those to digital. This is the big scene that I got to design and execute. And this is taking Times Square and pulling back the sidewalks and excavating downward, because one kind of unknown feature of that film is Luc Besson did not want to go up into a mega kind of high-rise iconography. He would rather decided that basically the Earth's oceans were being drained because of climate change or whatnot, and it's kind of the inverse actually. But as a result, excavation would go downward. So it was kind of an inverted cityscape concept, not really stated in the film. And then Day After Tomorrow was another big feature that I led the effort to create the digital New York modeling for that climate change film, as a matter of fact. But anyway, then I spent some time at Walt Disney feature animation doing visual development work. This is for a film Atlantis, which was going to be a big CG feature that they got cold feet and decided to go back to 2D. So it wasn't really the film that I anticipated, but some design work that I was able to do on the city and the Crystal Chamber. And this is Fantasia 2000, kind of an homage to the earlier Fantasia as far as some of the set design.
I'm gonna interrupt. I was at Disney. That was when Atlantis was being finished.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah. I was
So you were working there in feature animation?
I was working in feature animation in Southside.
What? No, no. So we must have been in the same building, Steve. That's pretty interesting. That we'll talk about that later. That's really funny. I was both at Northside and Southside.
Yeah, I had to ride a shuttle up to Northside on a regular basis. Sorry to hijack the talk, but
oh, that's funny. Well, we'll talk about that later on for sure. That's interesting. Okay, well, I want to know more about that. And then this is a film that was pivotal for me. This is Castaway, Tom Hanks's Zemeckis' feature, and around that same time frame. But this one taught me about natural environment. So, and most people don't think of Castaway as an effects film, but in fact, if we kind of look behind the scenes, we can see, in fact, it's purely fabricated. So the island and much of the ocean was of digital nature, and it taught me a lot about moving away from urban environments, hard models, into organic and natural scenes and what could be done there. So I got to kind of head up a lot of the environmental creation for that film, which was pretty fun. But anyway, long story short is features. I did this for about 2 decades, and I got a bit disillusioned by the nature of the films as time went on. I pretty much exited features right as Marvel Studios fare began to dominate, and I'm kind of glad I did, because I felt like we were making more meaningful films earlier. And of course, this is an issue of debate, but in any case, I've always had a strong interest in cultural heritage and the outdoors and natural science, science visualization, and so forth. And I always led a parallel life of exploring the outdoors and also being a digital, artist in a dark room on the other hours of the day. So I finally decided to fuse those together into a company. XRES stands for Extreme Resolution, because we help pioneer some gigapixel high resolution imaging that, again, I think allowed Steve and I to connect many years ago on that very topic. But the idea behind this was one of cultural heritage. And as a matter of fact, I still am, quite active with this today, having just come back from India with a big cultural heritage project that we're just starting up over there. But this involved early work at this company involved gigapixel, which is using robotics and long telephoto lenses to create a mosaicing. And funny enough, this is not anything new now, but it's still not widely practiced, funny enough, because I would have anticipated this would grow and grow. But that being said, it's a phenomenal aspect of imaging. And we decided to create all types of different rigs to put the camera in unusual places so we can control remotely. The problem with these images is we created them, and this is the early days of stitching algorithms, was we could create it. Photoshop at that time had a 30,000 pixel limit to the image. We contacted Adobe. We knew somebody in R&D there, and we convinced him to open it up to 300,000, which is what it currently is. Of course, these days 300,000 can easily be exceeded. But in any case, we were part of getting Photoshop's headroom opened up to accept larger images. The problem with these big images is that they would, back in the day, is they would take an hour to open, and they were hard to kind of show if you weren't in your office showing them live. So Google Maps had just released back at this period, and they had they released an open API. So we basically rigged it, modified it to point towards our terrestrial-based photographic tiles and away from their map tiles, and put this image up, which was taken during an early SIGGRAPH in Boston. And it's not a remarkable image in any way. It's a very banal image, but again, it was shot with I think a 300 mil, and has the level of detail that these insets show. So we put this up on Google Maps, and we had this massive viral event that took place, and this is 15 years ago now or something. But it was driving. It caused our ISP that we were with to literally kick us out, saying that the throughput was more than he could handle. And anyway, we found an ISP that did all they said they did all the Vegas casinos or gambling sites or something. They said, yeah, we can handle you. So they brought us on. And but anyway, so we had quite a buzz going about gigapixel finally that was put online. And this kind of launched our company. In any case, this is one example of, again, I'm going to show it to you live in a second, but this is just like in a PowerPoint format, what you can do. So this is an image I shot in China, just looking in and seeing the kind of resolution that you could pull. Now, this is a more recent image. We shot this probably 3 or 4 years ago, and we published this about a year ago. And this is I think a record image of El Capitan. We do a lot of work in Yosemite, as I'm going to talk about. And this was an image that, okay, this is strange. Let's see. All right, there we go. And this is up on BluePlanetVR.com. But if I open this image, this is actually streaming off the web now. And this is about 2,000 shots, I think. I forget the gigapixel rating on this one, but it's, and I also forget the resolution, but it's probably about 120,000 pixel wide or something. But in any case, we had two climbers, and actually, let me show you them first. They are right here. And this is going to come in a little soft and then get sharper. This is Roger putting them in Eric Sloan. Eric Sloan is he's one of the few human beings that's climbed El Cap more than 100 times. And if you're ever in Yosemite, he's the bartender in the Mountain House restaurant, if you ever go there. And but he's a hardcore climber. So he got to know us because of our work in Yosemite. And he said, is there any way that we could do El Capitan in extreme resolution and then show all the routes? So what we agreed to do was show up at about 7 in the morning, and we set up at a given station point, and we put a red shirt on Roger, or let's see, I forget who had what, but red and yellow shirt, and we just started shooting them on a gimbal with a 800 mil, I think we got from Canon. And just every few minutes, so we just started kind of watching them, you know, ascend up and pass by these other teams. And these guys were fast climbers. I mean, they were just hustling. And so as we started, so obviously by the end of the day, we got this snake-like, you know, overlapping group of images, which was a giant compositing job for our intern one summer. And then we went back the next day, though, and shot the big mosaic of the entire wall. And this is the same focal length, but again, mosaic with a robotic rig. And then this was all composited together into this. So if we go now back out, and of course, Eric added all the routes, and climbers use this online to kind of preview different things they're going to do. This is kind of an interesting area. This is called Texas Flake. And this is a big blade of rock. You can kind of see it from the shadow that exists out away from the wall. And not that I will probably ever get up there, but I've been told, Eric was saying that if you get behind it, you can see he's now behind, that you chimney up this thing, but it's so thin that if you wrap it with your knuckles or your fist, it'll make a gong-like sound. And as you push your way up out of here, apparently you almost feel like you're going to dislodge it. So it must be a little exciting. And then you get up here to what's called the boot flake, and you put an anchor in, and then this doesn't really, barely shows the rope, but you have to swing across. And again, you have probably 1,500 feet below you. This looks kind of pedestrian, but actually, if you look at video online, this is a pretty exciting thing that they do. And they run across to try to grab this edge and then continue on. So anyway, there's all these lovely little details and stories that you get. This is called the Great Roof Overhang. And this continues up. So anyway, this is one example of a gigapixel used, and here we even have them at the very top, kind of high-fiving at the end of the climb. So that's kind of fun. That was a neat usage, and we got a lot of press in the outdoor world for that. But this is something that we did a lot with early. This is another interesting variation of it. So we had a friend, Gene Cooper, who said, what if you did this with macro lenses and tried to do something very small? And we said, well, that's a great idea. Yeah, you could probably use a CNC gantry for 3D printing and do focus stacking automated. So this would be an XY grid with a Z depth focus stack because of the shallow depth of field with macros. So Gene said, well, I'd like to, if you don't mind, I'd like to make a company and actually offer this. And we said, yeah, sure, go have at it. You know, run with the idea. So he's been creating these for universities and so forth for the last number of years. And here's one made where we can go into each, I'm sorry, these are, gotta forget the term of this on a butterfly, but scale. I think it's called the scale. And, but again, you can see this great amount of depth of field, which you normally don't get in entomology and so forth. So yeah, pretty amazing ability to do that. So in any case, that's another variation. And then, whoops, I'm sorry, let's forget that. Let's go back to the next page. And another interesting variation about this, whoops, I'm sorry, did I not include a link? Well, I can just talk about it, is that you also get a depth map from the focus stacking. And as a result, you could then bump that up into a 3D model And I thought this would be a lovely thing to do in VR, where you could be walking around and, you know, pull out and realize you were right below Lincoln's nose, for instance. But some great opportunity, I think, with this scale of things with VR, which would be fascinating. This is another early image of gigapixel imaging, of just kind of showing relative sizes. 2K theatrical, what we're used to seeing theatrically, and then IMAX at 4K, and then large format, and then 90K, which is now nothing special at all in gigapixel. As a matter of fact, pretty routine these days. This was shot on a robotic head, though. So we, for a while, we're working in spherical gigapixel. Not that there's any great use for that, to be honest, especially not in VR. It's kind of, for various projective reasons, it's not necessary. But one project we put together early on was, we were approached by Greg Stock, who's a PhD in geology, works at the park, and he studies rockfall in the valley. And if you look at this valley map, I had was not aware of this before. I forget the scale of time here. It's in the hundreds of years, I think, of rockfall. But you can see the entire valley is covered, because this is a glacially carved valley. And as a result, there's all kinds of exfoliation and you know, decay that happens. This is called release mechanics, what he studies of what causes rock to fall. Well, of course, this kills people on a fairly routine basis. There's been a lot of really awful tragedies in the last even 5 to 10 years in Yosemite because of this. So as a result, he saw our gigapixel image that we took and got very excited, because right after that, this is in 06, this major rockfall happened off the face. He went back, shot it with the same focal length, and then finally he could calculate mass, because there's no datum for the valley. So all you're left with is a scar like this and a bunch of pulverized stone. And so if you had a datum, you could actually begin to understand what fell and how, what the mass was for your calculations. So in any case, that, and these are actual images of the exact rockfall that occurred. So long story short, he said, can you do the whole valley for us? And we said, wow, that sounds like a terrific opportunity. What kind of budget do we have? And he said, well, not much of one. So, so we said, well, that's fine, because we work with all these tech companies who are working with Google and Microsoft on gigapixel work at the time. And so we brought them to bear, and they funded this project that took about a year of planning, to be honest. This is a big project for us. And I calculated what the vantage points were for the valley that a gigapixel image could be made. And then I assigned that, we calculated what it would take for us to do this. And it was 36,000 vertical feet of climbing to do all of these. Well, that ruled Greg and I out pretty quick. I'm a good hiker, but I'm not, you know, up to 36,000, you know, over a few months' time. So we decided to enlist a group of colleagues of ours. So these are all photographers, visual effects artists, and people from a few came over from Europe for this, and we had this big event. We got Google to provide these gigapans, which is an early prototype of a robotic device. And Canon provided the cameras, Manfrotto, Lowepro, everybody donated 20 of these setups. And then here I am training everyone. And then we all got on to position. Now, this was this monster rig that Microsoft Research had concocted. And it used an astronomical mount, which was kind of a pretty heavy duty way to do it. And they actually, I don't know if this guy carried it, but somebody carried it out to the lookout point at Glacier Point, which is not a tiny, I mean, not insignificant way to carry this thing. But in any case, most people had small little rigs. And then we all had radios and GPS. I got on and said, shoot. And we took 10,000 images in 45 minutes. So they were temporally linked, which was wonderful. And what I'm going to do here, just to show you now the problem about this is this only runs, sorry, I should have called this up earlier. This only runs on Internet Explorer. And this is a thing called Silverlight, which was a wonderful piece of software that Microsoft developed, but unfortunately has depreciated. So, and what it allows you to do is embed multiple gigapixel images into a single presentation, which is very fabulous. So anyway, so let's go into one of these panoramas that was shot. And again, I can continue to roll in through this resolution all the way and come back. And what we might find here is, well, what is this turquoise color? Well, wow, I didn't know that Yosemite had a swimming pool in the park. Well, maybe let's look at that from a closer vantage point. So let's go over to Columbia Rock where this other team was. And maybe let's drill down here, and sure enough, now we get a better view of this pool and who's actually swimming there that day. Another fun thing to do is, if you know the park, you might know that on top of Half Dome, you can climb to the top. And here are some intrepid hikers that day. Well, how would you imagine they would get there? Well, we can find that out from looking at these other images. So from different vantage points. And as we go on profile, we can see there's the steel cables with the approach up to the summit. And any hiker can do this. It takes a little, you can't be fearful of heights, but it's a reasonable thing to do. And then here is the side view taken from a very distant view from the side. But now we can see the approach very clearly up the cables to the summit. So this was kind of a fun, and this was online for quite a few years, and rock climbers loved it because they would go and inspect, any of the big walls and look at their routes. I think there's a team. Yeah, there's a team there. But in any case, I'm still fascinated by gigapixel, but like I say, it never. Let me get back to my slide, and let's see here. There we go. But it still hasn't really developed. I don't know if there's any monetization behind it, to be honest. Okay, but anyway, I'm going to go through this a little more quickly. This is LiDAR data that was provided by the park of an aerial scan, 1 meter scan. You can see the resolution is even picking up the trail. And so this wasn't necessarily something the geologists needed, but I got excited by the art potential. So I bumped this up into a 3D model from that data, and then began to align each panorama to the model, and then and this is an orthographic view of one side of the valley. That's El Capitan and Yosemite Falls right here. And then I tracked in each spherical pano and projected it using a spherical projection at gigapixel resolution. And we got this couple of very interesting images. This is one that's orthogonal. So there's no true perspective in this view. And it's a very large gigapixel print. And it's just kind of an abstracted view of nature. I put this up at SIGGRAPH one year, and I hung out in the food court above, looking down and just wanting to see people's reaction. And this is probably somebody, I suspect, that knows the park and was confused by where is this picture taken from? And in fact, it's an impossible view, right? But it is based in real world veracity or information, which I find kind of interesting. Anyway, this project ended right after we completed the work. They had the biggest rockfall at that time in Yosemite history, and Greg was able to determine it was 210 feet by 36 by 21, and it rolled these boulders down, straight down into the major camp, into the park, and thank God did not kill a soul, but came right up into the cabins. And because of our study with Greg, they were able to close down 300 of these structures. They basically pulled the whole camp away. And as I tell people, you can either blame us or curse us when you try to get a site there. Anyway, moving on, this is some other work. Then we kind of got into full dome, planetarium dome, because it was such a great spatial projection to work in. And this led to a number of interesting collaborations. This is one with Ai Weiwei, the great Chinese artist, and a Navajo Nation artist, and working in a land art installation in the New Mexico landscape. And this we documented as a full dome film. And then as well as working with Bjork over in Iceland on some different projects there. And then we went through a phase of getting this VR kind of came back again. we got very interested in shooting 360 video. And we both had these two companies, Nokia and Jaunt, provide us these two cameras. And I still have this one in my office behind me. But as I say, it does a really nice job of holding paper down on the tabletop. It really is not, it's kind of a relic at this point, and it's really not used in any major way as it was not that long ago, maybe 8 years ago or so, for various reasons. But we were enlisted to go down to Machu Picchu with that camera and shoot a documentary on Machu, and we took some historic photographs, and this is from the VR experience, and then and had a lot of enjoyment with that. Now, into the real topic of this talk is photogrammetry, and this is this along the way we we saw the rise of photogrammetry again, of new algorithms, and the rise of GPU, which allows photogrammetry to be reasonable today. It's been around for quite some time, but it was always computationally prohibitive, and the image quality was never acceptable in my book. But certain leaps and bounds of developments have caused that to be not true anymore. So in this case, but you all are computer science experts. You know what this is about. But it's really image feature recognition, and then triangulation to establish the cameras, and then using depth maps, ways to create a mesh, and then texturing beyond that. So again, these slides are kind of for newbies at this concept, but you all, I suspect, may know quite a bit about it. The beauty about this is you can create modeling of real world objects or features that normally would be difficult or prohibitive with manual techniques. And so this was a part of a presentation. I can give you the link, as a matter of fact, if you're interested, as we talk afterwards. Autodesk, I did a class on this for Autodesk University last year. And in any case, these are some slides from that. And again, it's just a very kind of survey, very light class, but just ways to introduce concepts. And again, different techniques. Autodesk hired us also to do a shootout between laser scanning and photogrammetry. And it was kind of funny. They said, well, we'd like you to go around and shoot some beautiful locations. So I came back with a plan that was actually all over the world. We had Iceland and Namibia, and I thought, well, it's Autodesk, they can pay for this. And they said, well, we were kind of thinking maybe you keep it maybe just in California or something. So it kind of scaled down. But nonetheless, we picked some really great locations. This is at Mono Lake. These are called the sand tufa. They're really fascinating features, and perfect for photogram and or laser scanning. And we did both at both sites. And then in post-production, we compared what the virtues of each was versus the cons. And in any case, the reality is today, photogrammetry, depending on your subject matter, is really will do the bulk of what laser scanning can do, and is just a remarkably accurate thing these days. But in any case, it consists of shooting many, many images, and then having either custom rigs or knowledge of how to shoot it properly. So this was a device a custom rig of 3 cameras, and this is a very tall tripod. This is all packed down, but this goes to a really tall height of like 12 to 15 feet. And this was designed for a subject I'll show you in a moment. And this is an ancient Buddhist cave in the Gobi Desert that we were hired for. And I'll show you some of this in the VR headset in just a minute. But here we can see the regularity of the cameras with this rig. And I had floor tiles, which made it very easy to kind of index at a given point. And so there's certain techniques. The great thing about photogrammetry is it's really not difficult. There's nothing too rigorous about it. In some ways, I use the analogy of the million monkeys at a typewriter will create a great novel. And it's you could kind of approach it as a million monkey approach, but with some knowledge of methodology, you can actually get very good results with very few images, surprisingly. And the other beauty about it is the simplicity. It's really a single DSLR and with a very minimal amount of gear, either a custom rig or I use this carbon pole. which allows me to get aerial perspectives. So much like a drone without some of the restrictions that you might encounter. But here's a Native American site where I'm walking through just by hand and kind of covering all the occlusions that I think it contains. And then I'm using the pole to get up high to get the ground surface. And then what that gives me is this. So this is actually the three-dimensional model from photogrammetry, and it's just remarkably good today. And it used to be where I would look at a subject and I'd say, there's no way photogrammetry can get this. It's just too complex. Like I just shot Carlsbad Caverns about a month ago, and I had shot there before, but I went back to do some more, and it was just stuff that you would never imagine being able to capture is eminently doable with these new algorithms and packages. So pretty incredible time that we live in with this tech. Obviously, you can use drones as well. Drones, you have heavy lifter professional rigs, or you have the DJI consumer rigs, and this was shot with a DJI Phantom 4. It just really doesn't have the resolution to do anything meaningful, I don't think. I mean, these views are okay, but you really can't put yourself down at eye level here. So I shot this, I can show you this in the headset as well with the DSLR, and I have this in exquisite detail, but this kind of gives me a contextual model, which is useful. And then laser scanning, as I talked about, it's still very useful for urban man-made subjects, because anything that has specularity, reflection, transparency, even then there's issues, but or regularity. So like the worst thing you could ever possibly shoot would be an 80s era modern glass office building, high rise, that has many repetitive mullions with reflection. It would just be terrible with photogrammetry, by the way. But with laser scanning, you may stand a chance of being able to capture it. And of course, this is now advancing a bit. Leica is finally coming out with this device, and this looks pretty impressive. It's not too far from the Prometheus film aerial scanners, if you remember that. And they even have mounted one on a Boston Dynamics rig, which is always a bit unnerving, but again, another interesting way of maybe capturing in hostile environments. And of course, laser scanning produces point cloud data, and it has a beautiful aesthetic all of its own. And this is a group in London called ScanLab that does very nice work in Europe with this. And I love this kind of transparent isometric view of the Pantheon. Anyway, long story short, to begin to wrap this up, is as I got deeply into photogrammetry, I just kind of like the gigapixel work, we wanted to share it with the public, and how can we make this a readily disseminatable media. And so I envisioned this one. As a matter of fact, I had this crazy dream. I used to have very vivid VR dreams at the outset, and I woke up in the middle of the night just like totally in this deep dream where I was inside a human eye, and I was watching the light rays come in and the image being formed on the back of the retina, and I just thought it was the most poetic, beautiful thing I'd seen. So I quickly bought a anatomical eye model that morning and tooled it up in VR and took a look at it, and of course was kind of repulsed by it because it had the veins and all the anatomical features of it as if you were in a real eye. So what I did was I took that model, but I abstracted it, turned it into a more man-made thing, and that's the lobby for a collection of these locations that I now sell as a commercial product called Blueplanet VR. And this was originally released coming up on 2 years ago on Steam for tethered headsets for Vives and the like, but a year ago I released on the Oculus Quest, and after a lot of optimization, and it's there now. So and I'm happy if any of you, I always offer this, I never hear from too many, but if you have a Quest, I'm happy to provide you a download key for this. You can get my email from Steve, and save you 25 bucks or whatever, but I'm happy to give out keys for this, and you could take a look at it. And it's been a lot of fun. And these are all scenes from it. And these are scenes that locations we've captured over the years. I've been especially driven to capture more and more the last 2 or 3 years, just to create an inventory for the product. And these are all photogrammetry renders of the models and the locations, and just kind of a mixed bag. These are all places that I find fascinating for one reason or another. There's no real thread to them other than I find them of interest. And in any case, so here's, and speaking of Carlsbad, so here's a slide of Carlsbad from the first shoot that I did. And here next we can see, so this is the, as you see it in the headset, but see, there's the raw geometry. So now you can see again, the organic complexity that you can get is rather remarkable actually from this. And then here's this Native American work that I'm doing with another foundation, where we're going back and visiting these native sites on Navajo reservation land under permit with them, with a Navajo family, and they're taking us into these sites that have not been visited since the 30s by archaeologists. And it's just been a remarkable project, and just very fortunate to go and visit these very, very special, precious sites. And again, that's that one that we saw earlier. And then lastly, the other great project of the last year or few years, has been the Dunhuang Foundation, and this is called the Magao Caves. And I did not know about the Magao Caves. I haven't found too many Americans that have, but if you are from China or Asia, you may know about these. This is kind of the big, it's kind of, in a sense, the Machu Picchu of China, as far as being one of the top cultural heritage, gems or treasures that they have. And the issue with this, compared to, say, the Great Wall, which is, accessible from Beijing, this one you have to fly way out in the Gobi Desert for. It's actually near Kazakhstan and Mongolia. But what these caves are, there's 700 of them. 500 are decorated like this. Here's the mesh. Here's the final model, and it's covered in the world's greatest Asian art, in the annals of Asian art. Just remarkable. And I'm no expert in this, but Mimi Gates, who's Bill Gates's stepmother, is an Asian art PhD, runs the Seattle Asian Art Museum, is the one who has this foundation. So a lot of tech tech mavens, if you will, from the Bay Area run this foundation around the board, and they have funded this project. So we've gone over twice now and captured, I think, about 7 of these caves. And we were slated to go back in 2020, right before the pandemic, or right that summer, and capture 25 of them. So we got postponed. So we're hoping to go back next year and do the big sweep of all these. But we're so thrilled to do this, because the subject matter is so exquisite, and it's it's, as I say, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. You just cannot not create something spectacular with this artwork. And we did this in gigapixel resolution, so this is the 3D render, but you could get right up on anything. As a matter of fact, we have a magnifier I can show you in the headset. So with that being said, let me now, what are we doing on time? Steve, how much, when do you want to cap this? Not that I have that much more, but do we have to break right at 2, or can we go a little over?
Go a little over. Yeah, we can go over. I'll have to leave at 3, but
I'm not going to go to 3. Yeah.
I'm sorry, 2 your time, 3 our time.
I see.
Donna is here, so she'll be host. I already, my internet bombed out on me once already, and it
okay.
Famously. So, but
well, let me just do this. What I'm doing now is I'm booting up the Magao project, and let me just take you through a cave or two. And this will take probably 5 or 8 minutes or so, and hopefully it's going to run here, and I can just take you through the cave a little bit. Yeah, here we go. Now, can you hear any audio or no? A little bit? Yeah. Okay.
Select the introduction icon for the full.
Okay, I'm going to try to talk over this.
Overview, or locate a specific cave with the cave's icon.
Okay, so now I'm going to stand away from the camera here. And so this is just an opening. And what I'm going to do is actually, we have an introduction, kind of a training area, but just to save time, I'm going to go straight to the caves. And this is, again, I'm using a Vive Pro for this.
You are now on the grounds of the Mulgau Caves. You are looking at the modern cliff facade, which was stabilized in the 1960s by the Chinese government. Point your controller to the cave number to select it.
Okay, so I'm going to try this one now. And now we're in a very small cave. It's very dark, but if I, oh, and you know what? Wow, my light source is not working. I just found a bug. So let me switch to daylight. And now we're in this small cave. Normally I have a light source on a controller, but oh, wait a minute. Might be because of this. Sorry, 1 second. I'm trying to get my controller back. There it is. It's probably because it was turned off.
There you go. Could you talk about the door?
The door? How so?
So we get the same thing. That's why I mentioned it. The lighting effect on the door. When you look at
okay.
because it's a photograph from before. Because
you're talking about the door of this cave?
Yeah. This cave here. So if you go back to the full light mode, this is gorgeous, by the way. When you look at it before, we face this same challenge too, in that the light from the door is so bright that it interferes with the capture focus level. So the rest looks great, but then the door is overwhelmingly bright because you have to use the same exposure. For the,
we generally shoot HDR for all of this, so that will overcome some of that issue. Yeah, this would be a very high contrast environment because of that door. This is a very small cave.
Yeah.
So as a matter of fact, let me get out of here and I'll go to a larger cave. So let's go to 428.
I just mention it because in our captures we get the exact same effect without HDR. Where
yeah. No, it is true, and glare can be an issue with that as well. So, and I'll try to go a little slower. I know this is a little jarring because as I move my head, it's a little rapid. But here we are in the cave. What's kind of interesting here is we can go up. There's an invisible scaffold. If I stare, and if I can, get up to it here, I can ascend up to the top, and then
the small Buddha motifs that cover the wall.
And then look at this more in detail.
This means that each of the small Buddhas was individually created using clay molds and then attached to the wall.
I'm going to drop back down. And again, we can circumambulate this space much like a practitioner would and enter this back area. And then we can shift our lighting into artificial light. This was shot with ring flash and studio flash. We're going to go back around. And now let me exit just to save time. I'll take us to the longest cave. And that'll be 158. And this is kind of the heroic cave that I mentioned, which is just an absolute thing of beauty. What you can do here is a number of things. One is if I turn, we have beautiful detail on the ceiling and on the wall, but to see it more closely, if I turn my controllers upside down, I have basically a camera frustum. So I can go in and begin to examine the artwork a little more closely this way. Or go up to the ceiling and see some of this detail, which is very hard to get otherwise. And of course, I could float the viewer up to that point too, but this makes it a very easy way to accomplish. The other great thing about this, we can go up to a high level. And again, we're viewing the statue in a way that you never could as a visitor. You'd probably end up in a labor camp for a number of years if you were caught doing this. But that's one of the beauties of VR is we can get novel points of view, which would be otherwise inaccessible. And lastly, I'll go over to another hidden scaffold right here. And I can walk now over and view this stunning artwork. I mean, it's just an incredible location.